Stephen Fenech from Tech Guide here, and there are new Macs on the market, and these are powered by Apple's very own silicon, the M1 processor. We're going to talk to you today about the new 13-inch MacBook Pro and the new MacBook Air. If we had to sum up our reviews of the MacBook Air and the new 13-inch MacBook Pro in just a few words, it would be better and faster, and of course with a better battery life. The extra speed is really obvious when you turn on the new M1 Macs. From simple things, I'm talking like when you're waking from sleep, unlocking with your fingerprint, and just opening applications, really snappy and really responsive. But of course, the real improvements come when you're using intense applications, sophisticated applications like Final Cut Pro or Adobe Photoshop or the many others that creative professionals use. Even when playing graphic intensive games, you'll really notice a difference. But probably the most dramatic improvement you'll see is with the battery life. And we've never seen as big an improvement in battery performance from one generation to the next. It's like we've had a reserved battery on each of the Macs here, the 13-inch MacBook Pro and the MacBook Air, because we got nearly twice as much battery life. They run on the computer equivalent of the smell of an oily rag. The new M1 chips unite beautifully the hardware with the new macOS Big Sur software, and it combines that into one powerful machine. Now, the M1 chip is the first of a family of SoC chips, that's system on a chip, that have been designed by Apple, and expect to see updates over the next 2 years as the company transitions its entire Mac lineup to the new silicon. The first cabs off the rank, though, are the 13-inch MacBook Pro and the MacBook Air. And it's all due to the amazing performance of this new M1 chip, up to 8-core GPU, 8-core CPU, and it's achieved almost the holy grail for processor manufacturers, offering great performance but hardly using any power. And one of the things that helped that along is the fact that it's an SoC, which means all the multiple discrete chips normally spread out over a motherboard are now contained into one single piece of architecture. The other factor here in these new Macs running the way they do and offering that stunning performance is the software. macOS Big Sur, the latest version of Apple's desktop software, really works hand in glove with the hardware to take complete advantage of its power and the capabilities of that M1 processor. From even the simple things like waking from sleep, launching apps, and just general use, it is noticeably responsive. Even Safari operates a little bit better. In the case of the MacBook Air and the 13-inch MacBook Pro, when you put them to the test with applications like Adobe Photoshop, Final Cut Pro, which we actually use to edit our videos on this very MacBook Pro right here, even in Adobe Photoshop, cropping large images, exporting images, they are noticeably faster. But that's our workflow. We use Final Cut Pro. We probably don't use it to the extent of some creative professionals. Now, we went from using Final Cut Pro on our iMac, and our iMac is a 2019 27-inch Retina 5K, 3.6 gigahertz i9 Intel processor with 64 gig of RAM. So it's no slouch. The MacBook Pro running Final Cut performed better than that. So when you do things like adding titles and effects and even exporting the project as a file, you really notice the improvement. I wouldn't call myself a high-end user by any means, but even the tasks that I put these things through, they didn't really even raise a sweat. So when we were testing the 13-inch MacBook Pro and the MacBook Air. But you think about, though, the type of user that'll be attracted to these new computers, they're doing things like editing 4K and 8K video, even playing games like Shadow of the Tomb Raider. You get a 3.1 times faster graphics performance. Now, I often get asked, what does that mean, graphics performance? Well, it means that the game looks smoother because it's able to play it at a higher frame rate. But we think the biggest improvement people are going to see is with the battery life. These new M1 MacBook Air and the 13-inch MacBook Pro, battery life is exceptional. Now, having performance in the past with a laptop always came with a bit of a trade-off, and that was usually the battery life, but not now with the M1 Max. The battery performance is a dead set game changer. Now, we had about 1.6 times better battery life with the MacBook Air and about 1.8 times better with the MacBook Pro. And you think about that, and that was just with our workflow, which is a lot less intensive than other mobile professionals. But they might not even hit our level of battery life, but they will vastly be better than what you got previously from the previous version of the MacBook Pro and the MacBook Air. All the apps that come preloaded on an M1 powered Mac and all apps made by Apple are optimized obviously for their new silicon. But it has a universal platform that developers can actually take advantage of, so they can utilize their applications so they run well on Intel-based Macs as well as M1 Macs as well. And even if the apps haven't been transitioned to universal, there is also Rosetta 2, which means that in an Apple-made application, it will still run seamlessly on these new M1 Macs. And it's also possible to run your favorite apps on the M1 Max as well. So apps you use on the iPhone and the iPad will run on the M1 Max as well. So apps you've bought on your iPhone or iPad, you can simply download them to these new Macs at no extra cost. The MacBook Air and the 13-inch MacBook Pro both have the same M1 chip. So why would people opt for the 13-inch MacBook Pro? It's more expensive. They both have a 13-inch Retina display, they have 2 Thunderbolt USB-C ports, and also have the same Wi-Fi 6 compatibility for faster wireless performance. The big difference between the two of them is in the thermal performance. Now, with the 13-inch MacBook Pro, it's able to perform at higher speeds for longer. Now, the MacBook Air is fanless, so totally silent. And that means that it has its limitations when the chip that's powering through a task starts to overheat. Then rather than overload the system, it'll throttle back that performance to stay within its thermal limitations. But with the 13-inch MacBook Pro, that's not an issue, because with a superior thermal performance, it can go faster for longer and really churn through your work. So there we have it, the new M1 MacBook Air and the new M1 13-inch MacBook Pro. Both of them go on sale through Apple stores from this week. The other Mac in the lineup is the Mac Mini, also powered by Apple's new M1 processor. We never got a chance to review those, but we have reviewed both the MacBook Air and the new 13-inch MacBook Pro. You can read that complete review at techguide.com.au. Thanks for watching.